Hello and welcome to the Inner Compass Guide podcast with me, Liz Scott. And today we're exploring a really profound question. And that question is, who am I? Well, with me to have this conversation is Sam Jarman, who is a coach, author and speaker and a golf professional. And Sam, I just want to say a big hello and welcome. It's great to see you here today.
Hi, Liz. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a kind of a big question, Sam, isn't it? And it's maybe not the kind of question we often open up when we're starting a conversation with who am I? But I know it's something that's really central to certainly the work that you're doing at the moment. So why is it important for us to sort of even start to think about this question? What difference does it make?
I think it's one of the three big questions that human beings have been asking themselves for thousands of years. So when I'm working with either with an individual or with a group of people, it's as I say, the three questions we talk about are who am I? What is this? So what is the nature of reality? And what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? Those are the three big questions that most human beings are curious about the answers to. So it's the first of those questions seems like the easiest one to deal with because it's very immediate. You have a sense of I am, of who you are. But it's almost one of these things that it's so close to us. It's so it's almost too close to us. We almost take it for granted. I think nobody seems to ask themselves that question. It's like, if I ask somebody, well, who are you? They'll generally give me a list of the things that they've done or the labels that they've got or how other people regard them. So they might give me their job or where they grew up or whether they're married or not, or, their gender, whatever that is. But it's really curious that when we actually start to explore that question more deeply, we come to see that the referent for those words I or I am is not something material. It's not something physical. It's not a body and a mind. It's something else. And I think exploring that has fundamental and profound implications for anybody that wants to get curious about that, because it answers so many of the other smaller questions about life and the things that might be troubling us. A lot of the answers are in the answer to that question.
Yeah, and I really pick up what you say there, which is we often, if somebody says, who are you? then the first thing we go to, certainly for me anyway, is I go, well, I'm a coach, I'm a trainer. And they might say, well, what other things do you do? I play the saxophone and I do this and I'm married. So there's a common sort of language that we have as we interact with each other as to, answering that, what do you do? And who are you? But what I really hear and what you're saying here is that that's almost like a real surface layer. And if you peel that back and sort of reflect a little bit deeper on that, then you're starting to go into a different space of understanding who you are. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the easiest ways to do it is to start by stripping stuff away. One of the questions that I ask is, well, if we took away all the labels, would you still be you? Would you still feel a sense of I, of beingness? And the answer is always yes. So, when we look in terms of who am I can change my job. I can change where I live. I can change my relationship status. I could even change my gender if I really wanted to. So when we are talking about who we are and the essence of us, is that something that is permanent and that is essential, or is it something that can be changed? And when we start to see who we are in terms of what's permanent and what's never changed, that's a completely different perspective than identifying with, as I say, the labels that either we've put on ourselves or other people have put onto us. you know, times describe it in terms of are you the central character in the story of Liz or of Sam, or are you what knows the story? And people can see that the story has changed from the moment they were born. The story has changed, but the feeling and the sense, they've always referred to themselves as I. So the story can change, and the story will undoubtedly change, but that's not who you really are. Who you really are is the knowing of that story, the awareness of that story.
Well, this is really interesting. So if I was to just get a bit of help here from you to go, well, what do you mean by the difference between the story and then I think you said that which observes the story?
That which knows it, the awareness of it. The awareness of it, yeah.
So what is, when you talk about the story, what do you mean by that?
Well, as I say, if somebody asks me, you know, if somebody said to me, "Who are you?" I would tell them the story of my life. I was born in Liverpool, and then my parents moved to Bedfordshire, and then I grew up and I went to this school. I played these sports. I got this job. I moved. I live in this house. I've got a cocker spaniel. I do coaching and speaking and writing, and well, that's my story. That's the experiences that I've had in my life. But there's one thing that has been constant throughout those experiences, which is the awareness of them. So there is a difference there. I am not my story, because there are elements of my story that I've completely forgotten. You know, I went to my mum's for Christmas, and she was reminding me of some stuff that I'd done and I'd said, and I'd completely forgotten. But I didn't at one moment think that I was somebody different, because I wasn't aware of the things that she was talking about. So when we talk about, you know, most people are looking to understand themselves and their lives better. Well, when we're referring to my life, what are we referring to? Well, it's basically a collection of experiences joined by one particular point of perspective. Well, what is that point of perspective? It's the awareness, it's our awareness of all of those experiences that happened in a continuum as we see them throughout, from the moment we were 5, 10, 15, 20, right the way through our lives. But at all of those points in the story, I referred to myself as I. I knew I had a sense of I-ness, of me-ness, of isness. That's what I mean between the awareness of the story and the content of the story.
Yeah, I can really see that. So, you know, looking at, for me then, you know, the story of my life, and the being one of 4 children, and growing up and going, just not much liking school, and doing this and not wanting to be a teacher, so moving university, and then becoming a reporter, and then doing counseling training. You know, I think I'm really used to telling people the story of my life. Like,
yeah, we all are.
Like
we're very attached to it.
Yeah. and also that I want to ask you this too, because, you know, there's almost like that's the story of my life. But then I would say, oh, well, if I peel back that layer, I could give you another story of my life, which is, well, you know, I'm a bit insecure. Sometimes I feel a bit of an introvert. Other times I really like, you know, I like doing this. Sometimes I feel a little bit, I have low self-esteem, or so it's almost like it ceases to be the events of my life, and it's almost like now this is now the story of how I see myself. But that, I guess you're saying, is also a story. Is that fair to say?
Exactly, because that you're still aware of that. There is still something that is aware of those thoughts and those feelings and those beliefs. So you know, you have to peel that layer away as well, and you keep peeling the layers away, and then you get to a point. If you can do a little thought experiment. So if we took away, you know, if you shut your eyes and you couldn't hear and you couldn't feel your body, if we put you in a sensory deprivation chamber and you had no memories, you had no imaginings, there was just awareness, would you still be you? And most people would say, well, yes, I would be. So as I say, you can't, there is one point of reference that we know to be I or I am, and it's just awareness. It's what we sometimes call the dative of experience. The baseline of experience is awareness or consciousness. That's where you end up when you peel away everything that isn't you, everything that's either a thought, a feeling, a perception, or a sensation. What are you left with? Well, you're left with awareness, and most people would still refer to that as I or me.
So that's the, as you say, that's almost like the constant. That's the, I think the image that comes to mind is, you know, the old projectors with the light. It's almost like the constant is the light, and then you've got the old movie flicking through, haven't you?
Yeah, that's a lovely analogy.
Yeah. So why, this sounds like a weird question in a way, but
weird questions are always the good questions.
Yeah. So why is it important to even think about that? Why don't we just carry on with the movie of our lives? Like, why even look at that?
Well, look, there's no imperative to explore this. You know, if you're happy and you're content, the most important thing in life, when we come on to the one of those three questions, what's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to be happy. That's it. So if you're happy and your story is one that you're content with, then live your life, be happy. But unfortunately, most people aren't at that point because there is a little, or for some people, a very big sort of nagging doubt or a fear in the back of their mind, which is, look, if I'm the central character in this story, it's very, very important for this story to have a happy ending. And that's the world, that's the experience that most people are having. So if that's your belief, if you believe you are the central character in that story, you have an attachment to that story and some worries and some fears about what may happen. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of the bad news, but the story for this body and this mind, the end of the story for this body and this mind is certain. I'm afraid it's going to come to an end at some point. Now, that's the big fear that most people are dealing with in their lives. You know, this appreciation of mortality. We're this body and this mind is going to come to an end. I've got no doubt about that. But whether that is what I'm referring to when I talk about me or I is, am I going to come to an end? Well, that's a different question. And it hinges on whether you believe yourself to be the meat suit and the story.
Oh, I've not heard of that before. The meat suit and the story. Okay. And this is so interesting, isn't it? Because it feels to me as though pretty much everybody I engage with is engaging with the meat suit and the story, for want of a better way of putting it. But that
it's true.
So it's almost like it's the mask or the costume, or
absolutely. That's what a persona is, another word for mask. And we're dealing with, if you believe yourself to be a person, a persona, then that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the mask. You're dealing with the character. You're dealing with the character in the play or the character in the story.
So underneath that mask, underneath that persona, underneath the costume, there's something else. And that's something else which is answered in the question, who am I? Or is the space to look to answer that question?
Yeah, I think we've got to be very careful when we say answered, because that sounds like we've nailed it down and defined it. And that's not strictly how it is, because I don't think that you can't know it in conceptual terms. So you're never going to come to a conceptual answer. You can certainly come to a feeling of knowing it. But I think it's more important to consider those three questions than to have answered them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's a really great way of putting it, because again, I think we're so used, aren't we, to asking the question with a view that, oh, well, I'll flick to the back of the book and find the answer if I can't work it out myself.
Yeah.
And you're not talking about that.
No, and I think this is, it is one of the, this is an archetype that's been recognized by sort of psychologists and psychotherapists for a long time, is that human beings have a desire to find closure. That's one of the things that gives us meaning in our lives. And I can't say that I'm any different, but my closure has come from realizing that there probably isn't any closure, or there isn't an answer. And that in itself is that the more I look into this, the more and more I'm convinced that the mind's primary purpose is to deceive itself. You cannot exist as a human being without the mind deceiving itself to a greater or lesser extent. The trick is just knowing that that's what's happening. You can't escape it, but you can be aware that it's happening, and that's one of the things to just have in the back of your mind whenever you're doing this sort of inquiry, is that your mind is always going to be trying to make sense of it and come up with theories about it and concepts about it, because that's what it does.
Yeah, and this is interesting, isn't it? Because that's not what this is about. This is about, I think, reflecting is a good way of describing it, as you said there.
Yeah.
So look, I'm kind of curious then. You came up with 3 questions, and I was going to ask you one question, who am I? But I'm really,
I didn't come up with those questions, Liz. They've been around for thousands and thousands of years.
Okay, yeah, but let me ask you them, and let's see what your answers are.
Yeah,
just
okay.
joking. Not your answers, really. So
I can give you my best. I'm happy to give you my best guess, but I can't. Yeah. But look, the whole purpose of this is it's not for anybody else to come up with answers. It's for you to explore these for yourself. That's the whole purpose of this. And so, the last thing that I want to do is to sit here and give anybody else my. I'm happy to say what I think, but these aren't the answers. You've got to go and find the answers for yourselves. Explore for yourself. That's the primary thing that we're trying to get over here.
And I think it's worth saying as well that this is something that everybody can explore.
Absolutely.
You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need.
Absolutely.
You can do it right this minute. You
Absolutely.
can reflect inwards and explore what this is for you.
It's perhaps the most important thing that anybody can do. If you, as I say, if you can spend some time and come to some, as I say, not some answers, but some understanding around these 3 questions. A lot of the, I call these the 3 big questions, and it's amazing that when you come to some understanding of the possibilities of these 3 questions, how the little questions that we get so caught up on in our daily lives, some they just don't. Yeah, they just don't appear anymore. They just seem to evaporate somehow.
Yeah. Okay. So let's look at that second question, which is, what is this? This being what? This world, this place we live in? What do you mean by what is this?
What is this? What is the fundamental nature of reality? What is the fundamental nature of our experience? And this is again a question that scientists and philosophers and human beings in general have been exploring and thinking about for, as I say, for thousands and thousands of years. At least 5,000 years of recorded history, and probably longer. And the more that when you start off with the who am I question, because that's the one that seems most important, because you think, well, if I can get that figured out, I can come on to the other 2 later. But the once you've kind of seen that who you are, it is not essentially material, it's not physical. It's a spiritual experience. It's not a material experience. You can start to then almost extrapolate that out into, well, if that's what I am, then that's got some pretty profound implications for what the rest of this experience is. And what you start to see is that everything that I know is either a thought, a feeling, a perception, or a sensation that occurs within awareness. Those are the only things that I can know. And this world out there, whatever it is I can't know it outside of those things. So what that kind of opens up the possibility for is, well, this thing that we believe to be physical, material, that's actually just an abstraction. So it's a conjecture. It's basically what human beings have come up with as a concept to explain thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and sensations. And that there is something out there. There is reality. I'm not saying that reality is an illusion or that reality is not real. An illusion is something real. What I'm saying is there's a very strong, or it seems to me that there's a very strong possibility that it's not what it appears to be. It's not physical. It's not material.
So I've got to just interrupt you there, Sam, because I think this is quite a big leap, isn't it? Because, you know, if you were I know we're on the computer here, but if we were side by side, I'd be tapping my desk and I'd be saying, well, that looks real. That's wood, and my computer is real, and this pen is physical. I wouldn't want that to be poked in my eye. So,
well, how do you know it is, Liz? How do you know it is? Because your experience of that pen, what is it?
Well, go on, take me through that. Let's look at this pen, and we'll.
So how do you know you've got a pen in your hand?
Because I can see it. Okay,
that's a perception.
But how else can I describe it if I can't? That's the only way I can describe it, is through how I see something or feel it. I can feel it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a sensation. So your experience of your pen is a perception and a sensation, which are mental experiences. Now, there is something there, but what is that? That's the big question. And this is where, unfortunately, 300 years of science have led us down a path which is or has become, or is for physicists, it has become a dead end. And for everybody else, we're suddenly realizing that the physicists are at a dead end, because whether you experience that from what I'm saying, which is that it's purely mental, your experience of your pen is mental, or if you talk to someone who understands quantum mechanics, they will tell you that pen is not made of anything solid. It's actually made up of a field of energy. Or if you want to go one step back from that, it's made up of a group of subatomic particles. But what it is not is a solid object made of stuff called matter. So whether you want to come at it from my perspective, which I would call a spiritual perspective, or from a hardcore, quantum mechanics is the most up-to-date, most sophisticated, most accurate description of the patterns of regularities of nature that we've got. And it's basically telling you that the seat that you're sitting on is a field of energy held together with other fields of energy. It's not a chair made of wood. That's just the name we give to it through language and through the customs and through the perspectives that we've got and the cultural and societal conditioning that we've got. We believe in this world of physical stuff. But unfortunately, it's not what it appears to be. Okay, so just to see if I've kind of grasped it, but put it in my language and see whether this is kind of in what you're saying. So in a way, what I'm hearing is that you're saying that we can only ever experience this world through our perceptions and our senses, and so we can because we can only do that,
it has to be that we are constructing a world mentally, or
Exactly.
we're constructing a concept of what that world is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the only way you can do it. And if you examine that world through a microscope, as a physicist might, or create theories and models, that can only take you so far, and then there's a kind of a question mark as to what is this? Yeah,
absolutely. It's one of the fundamental misunderstandings of science today, which is that science cannot tell you what anything is. It can only tell you what something does. So science is amazing. It's, you know, I'm a big fan of the scientific method and all of the stuff that goes on, which has enabled us to build these amazing technologies and, you know, create the world the experience of the world that we're living in today. But science cannot tell you what something is. It can only tell you what stuff does. When you come to the question of what something is, that's not a scientific question, it's a philosophical question. Because whatever road you go down, you come to a point where you have to go, look, it just is what it is. Now, if you go, for me, when I take all the layers off and peel it back to the bottom line, if you want to call it like that, the bottom line to me seems to be consciousness or awareness. If you talk to a quantum physicist, they'll probably take you down to the bottom layer of they'd call it something, either the quantum field or the standard model of particle physics. It's what everything in the world can be explained in terms of, but you can't explain that in terms of anything else.
Say that last bit again. It's what, okay. So it's what I really get what you're saying is, so I might describe, you might describe it as consciousness or awareness. A scientist might say this is an energy, a quantum field or an energy field, whatever they describe it as. You might actually be using different language to explain exactly the same thing.
I think there's a very strong possibility that we are.
So one would be seen as a scientist describing it. One might be seen as a more philosophical approach describing it, but actually you're pointing to the same thing.
Absolutely. And a priest would call it God. That's you know, we are just talking about the as I say, it's called the ontological primitive. It's what everything else can be explained in terms of, but you can't explain that in terms of anything else. It just is what it is. It's the baseline, it's the foundation, it's the essence, it's the source, all of those, it's the principle, it's all of those, it's the bottom line, if you want to call it like that, and then everything else is built from that. So that's not a science, as I say, that's not science, that's philosophy.
Yeah. Okay. And it reminds me in a way of the first question, who am I?
Yeah.
Which you're kind of once again taking something right back. So beyond what you initially see and saying, well, is it that? And saying, well, let's see what's beneath that, and going deeper and deeper. Yeah. So what, you know, you used the word spiritual, and I know you touched on the language of awareness and consciousness as well. So what is it in our world, do you think, that there are many people that have a little bit of an allergic reaction to that kind of languaging, or having that brought in? You know, it's fine if you're going to talk about that in philosophy, or if you go to church and you talk about God, but actually that's not the real deal. That people can get a bit uncomfortable about that language. What's your take on that, Sam? Because I just find it's such an enriching conversation to have, but it's not something that everybody feels comfortable diving into.
Yeah, and I think, and I completely understand that. If you'd put me back 20 years ago, I would not have been the least bit open to this conversation. You know, my father was an engineer, hardcore atheist, materialist, scientist. You know, it just wasn't a conversation that, you know, everything could be explained in terms of science. And it's not until you actually start talking to scientists and reading about science that you realize that that's just not true. You know, science probably knows less than 5% of what's out there. So I think people, that the reason people get twitchy about it is our cultural conditioning. It's as simple as that. It's the society we live in, which is by and large atheist, materialist, and science has almost become the religion rather than all of the other religions. And that's largely down to the success of the science and technology that we see around us today. You know, we believe that the physicists and the scientists have got everything figured out. And it's not until you start talking to them that you realize that they haven't. You know, and you know, the good ones would be happy to admit that as well, and they're excited about it because it means that there's more to learn. But you know, the as I say, the cultural paradigm is that we know pretty much everything that there is to know, and if we don't know it, then we're in the process of figuring it out. And we've only got to see, you know, what's been happening with COVID over the last, you know, year, that we're miles away from that. We still don't really know what it is. We don't know how to treat it. We don't know how to prevent it. We're getting there, but there's still so many questions around that, despite the billions of dollars and the, you know, the thousands and thousands of man and women hours that we've put into researching it. We're making slow progress. You know, so as I say, we overrate the efficiency of science in terms of explaining our experience, unfortunately. And I think that's, you know, as I say, science has become the new religion.
You see, I really love what you're saying here, because, you know, for me, I guess, and again, this is in my language, but I really see that we culturally have a spiritual thirst. That's how I kind of see it.
Absolutely.
That people are dying to quench, but it's almost like they don't quite know how to quench that thirst. And what I love about the questions that you've offered here are they are like dipping into that well, that you can quench that thirst, even if you don't find the answer, which I love that you say that, because that's not the point of this.
No,
but it's drinking from that well.
Absolutely. And I think that's why the who am I question is the best one to start with, because I haven't, you know, I talk to, you know, all sorts of different people, professional sports people, school teachers, you know, school children, all vast, you know, a real wide array of sort of backgrounds of people. And I haven't met a single person that isn't curious to understand themselves better, to understand the nature of their experience better. So that who am I question, you know, if I wouldn't, you know, I'm not going to wade into the second question before we've explored the first one, because that will freak people out. If somebody's curious about that, then I'm really happy to have the conversation with them. But yes, that is, you know, it's almost like that question is the logical next step once you've started to, you know, once you've realized that you're not who you think you are, then the questions start about, well, what about the rest of my experience? Is that what it appears to be? That's how it tends to go. And so, you know, that's the beauty of this is, you know, once you've opened up that, you know, like you say, the well of curiosity, once you've got the cover off it, most people get pretty thirsty, which is lovely.
Well, that leads us beautifully on to the third question. I know you already answered it a bit earlier. You gave us the answer to that one, but let's just reflect on it a little bit further, which is, what's the purpose, or what's the meaning of life? Yeah,
the purpose of life is to be happy. That's it. And that's the end game. That's the so what. Everybody, you know, if we start off around the who am I question, or we get on to the, you know, what's the nature of reality question, eventually we get back to the, well, yeah, that's really interesting, Sam, but so what? And it's like, well, you know, the purpose of life, what's the purpose of life? If you ask any one of the 7.5 billion people on this planet, what do you want most of all? Or what do you want for your kids? What do you want for your family and friends? They'll all say one thing: I want them to be happy. So that's such a powerful thing to know, because you immediately see that that's what unites humanity. The desire for well-being, happiness, peace, love, freedom, whatever word you use to describe that sensation of beingness, of okayness, of wellness. That's that's what everybody wants. And all the strife and conflict and confusion in the world doesn't come because people want different things. It's because they believe that there are different routes to getting them. And that's a massively powerful thing to know, because it means that you can talk to somebody who you fundamentally disagree with, and Jeeps, there's plenty of those around. But you know that they are the same as you, that you are as one, that you share a being with them, because you are from the same source, consciousness, awareness, whatever you want to call it, and you want the same thing, which is happiness, which is the knowing of that beingness, that consciousness. So it's you know, this is the intuition that every single religion, philosophy, and spiritual tradition is built on: the realization of a shared being, the realization of oneness. And how do we know that oneness? Well, we know it as a feeling, and we call it happiness.
Mm. And other words, I guess, might land differently as well. So for me, it's not quite happiness, but for me, Sam, I describe that as a kind of a real deep contentment. I have a different connotation of maybe what happiness is than other people. So
that's fine. It's
like bringing it back to that that deep feeling, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's, you know, it doesn't matter what word, the intuition you say. So, you know, when I was talking to my friend Nora from Finland the other day, like the Finnish word for it would be something completely different, but the feeling of it would be exactly the same, whether you're, you know, from Devon, whether you're from Milton Keynes, whether you're from Finland, whether you're from China, whether you're an Eskimo. That the feeling would be the same. You would have a different word for it. And as I say, even within, you know, you and I are pretty close in terms of the way that we see things. You've got a different word for it. You know, I use the word happiness, but I think that the word is probably the word I would probably use, you know, if you really wanted to be, it would be freedom. That's the experience of it, or that's the word that I think encapsulates the feeling best for me. But as I say, it doesn't matter what word you use for it. It's the knowing of it. It's the feeling. It's the living of it.
So what stops us from experiencing it, Sam? If that's, I can understand that statement you say, which is like, ultimately that's what everyone is looking for, happiness, or whatever the word is that you might use. But yes, we're all looking for that. So if we're all looking for that, and fundamentally we all have access to discovering that within ourselves, then what stops us from doing that?
It's one of these things, and it's so, when you see it, it just, you're like, oh. What stops us seeing that is we put conditions on our own happiness. And again, it's part of our, we do.
How do we do that then?
Well, if you think about it, from the moment that you could speak, you every time you know, you had a feeling. So we're always living in a continuum of feelings, and sometimes we feel happy and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we feel happy, sometimes we feel don't. So what happens is, from the moment that you can communicate, whenever you show signs of not being happy or not being okay, somebody asks you, oh, what happened? Why do you not feel okay? And you're pointed to something in the outside world that has caused you to feel the way that you're feeling. So you start to make this connection between the way you feel and an experience that you've had in the outside world. And pretty soon that becomes your reality. You start to believe that your happiness is dependent on the situation or circumstances in the world outside that you're experiencing. And you're told that, you know, we're told as we're growing up, you know, in order to be happy, you need to go to this school, you need to get these exam results, you need to go to this university, you need to get this job, you need to have this partner, you need to have this amount of money, this car, this house, live in this part of the world. All of these things are conditions that we place on our own happiness. And that is the reason why so many people are struggling, is because that is their belief, that is their conceptualization of the world.
So what you're saying there is that we kind of think that we need to achieve or do or get somewhere or do something,
yeah,
before we can be happy.
Exactly. We believe that happiness comes from achievement, attainment, or from material possessions, or wealth, or money, whatever you want to call it. And look, it's a very, very convincing illusion, if you want to put it like that, because, you know, if you feel like if you've put a condition on your own happiness, like, I'm not going to be happy unless I win a golf tournament, and then you win a golf tournament, you're going to be happy. But your happiness has not come from the winning of the golf tournament. What's happened is basically you've told yourself that in order to be, you've put this stress on yourself, this pressure on yourself, and you've worked hard, you've practiced, and you've gone to the tournament, and you've played well, and you've managed to get it done. And in the moment of winning that golf tournament, all of that seeking and resisting falls away. So you feel happy. But all you've done is drop back into the space that you were in before all of that became a thing. So, you know, if you ask people, when were you happiest? Most of them will say, when I was a kid, before I had anything to worry about. So if that's true, well, then happiness is who we are. It's not what we do. It's our true nature. It's our essence. It's our source. And all that happens is we put barriers in the way, and then we believe that the happiness that we feel comes from getting over those barriers or knocking them down. And we play this game for the rest of our lives. And it's nuts.
And it's exhausting mentally, isn't it?
Oh, God, yes. Yes, it is. It is. It is.
You see, that's it. It's we use the language of well-being in the work that we do. We use well-being and resilience as a sort of the bridging words to support people to look for that within. But it's like when I start to see that within me, I see it within others.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful, and sometimes I don't know, Sam, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but sometimes I feel so touched and moved because I really see the pain that people are in because they just can't see that which is there within themselves. And in a way, I think that's why the work that we're involved in with the community and the work that we're doing with people is it just feels really rich for me. It really feels like a very nourishing space to hang out in. And I guess we're kind of moving towards the end of this now, but it's like the questions so I'm going to remind people of the questions that you love to reflect on with your clients and the people you work with. Who am I? What is this? What is this reality we're in? And what is the meaning or the purpose of life? It's like those reflecting like that is almost the gateway or the portal to finding the very thing that you're chasing elsewhere. It's giving you access to that which you think maybe you need to do other things in order to achieve. So any final comments from you, because this has been such a wonderful conversation.
I've really enjoyed it. It's the thing is knowing it's not out there somewhere. And you know, when you use the word seeking or chasing, that's what most people are doing. And unfortunately, our culture is built on this misunderstanding. You know, materialism is it's a deprived myth. It's a belief system that has been built up over the last 300 years, and it's the cause of most of the misery and suffering that we're experiencing in our lives and as a wider society. And those three questions, exploring those first three questions, are the gateway to escaping that. And the more people that, you know, and it's, you know, the last 20 years have been remarkable in terms of, you know, we've now got a language in Western culture to actually talk about this stuff, which didn't exist 20 years ago. You know, if you wanted to do this exploration, you had to go to India or look into, you know, very, very different traditions than we're used to exploring and talking about today. But you know, with the work of people like Francis Lucille and Rupert Spira and Bernardo Kastrup and you know, Eckhart Tolle and people like that, we're starting to have this conversation now, and it's rapidly becoming something that people are more comfortable to talk about, and it's largely because we've now got the language to do it. So, as I say, just by looking at those three questions and exploring them, you know, either on your own or with somebody who is also curious about this conversation, it's the most important thing you can do in order to try and help other people. And I see this a lot, which is that, you know, there's a lot of people out there who want to do good in the world and who want to try and help and make things better. But you can't do that by trying to fix what's out there, because as we've just explored, what is it? We don't know. The best way that you can help and you can start to make a difference is to get clear in your own mind what's really going on and to understand this for yourself. It's like, the way I describe it, I see this a lot with the coaches I work with, where they're so busy trying to help other people, which is wonderful, but you can't give somebody £20 if you've only got £5 in your own pocket. So what's most important is that you explore this for yourself and you start to look after your own well-being and your own happiness and your own love, peace, freedom, whatever you want to call it, because when you fill your own bucket up, then it starts to overflow out into the world. But if you're constantly bailing your own bucket out when it's only got a little bit in the bottom, what you're actually doing is trying to make yourself feel better by trying to fix other people. And unfortunately, the world is full of people who are trying to fix the world and just making things worse in the process, because they don't understand what's going on. You can't fix something that is unfixable. It doesn't need fixing, because it doesn't exist in the way that we think it exists. So whether that's climate change or the economy or, you know, any of the social problems that we've got, the biggest thing that you can do is to see for yourself who you really are. Once you get that down, you can't help but have a positive effect on the people around you.
Yeah. And I, you know, I would say that when, I don't know about you, but certainly when I'm around somebody who really is in that calm and settled space of, it just does something for me. They're not trying to fix me. They're
Exactly.
not, they're just, it's almost like reminding me of that within me. Does that make sense?
100%, Liz. Absolutely. And that is what, you know, you just, it's not what somebody says to you, it's just how they are with you and how they are present with you. That's what makes the difference. And it doesn't matter, you know, which one of the caring professions you're in, whether you're a nurse, a doctor, a psychotherapist, a coach, a counsellor. As I say, it's not what you say, it's just how you are and how you show up and your presence. That's what makes the difference.
Love it.
The more that you can see this for yourself, the bigger impact you'll have.
Sam, I love this. If people want to find out a little bit more about you, what's the best way to do that?
I'm on Twitter, which is at Sam Jarman Golf. My sort of coaching, I've got two websites. My golf website is samjarmangolf.com, and my other website is sportsprinciples.com. But if you look for me on Twitter and or send me an email, sam@samjarmangolf.com, then you know, I love talking about this stuff, as you can tell. So
and you've written some books as well.
Yeah, I've got a couple of books out there for golfers. I've got another one in the pipeline at the moment, and then perhaps another one after that. So yeah, it'll be. I'm pretty findable if somebody wants to get in touch.
Brilliant, Sam. It's been a real delight catching up with you today.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Liz.